In this video, I'm going to show you through the process of scanning items into the blending process. The application that you're going to see during this video is aimed towards fixed touchscreen terminals on the factory floor. Firstly, I'll navigate to the recipe blending form, which will then open the form that can be used to scan ingredients and raw product into the recipe work order that I created in the previous video. The first process will be to select the recipe plan. To do this, I'll select the magnifying glass, which will then open up the work order selection screen. Within this screen, I can see some information regarding to the recipes, such as the recipe plan, description, and the number of batches within the work order. I can then select the work order that I'm going to produce against. You can now see that the ingredients which are used to make this recipe blend are displayed on the screen for the operator. At the top of each product button, you can see the scale which is required to be used to weigh the ingredient. For this recipe, all the ingredients are used in the bulk scales, except for the meatball unit, which is used in the fine scale. In the middle of the product button, this is displaying the ingredient code and the ingredient description. At the bottom of the button is the quantity details for each of the ingredients for this work order. On the right hand side, we have a visual gauge which will simulate the total weight required for the batch and visually show the operator the amount required for each ingredient as well as the configured tolerances for the ingredients. We can then also see that this work order has notes assigned to it for the operator to read whilst on the factory floor. This can be used as notes to the operator to check something, in this example to make sure that the packaging is correct. What I will now do is use my tethered barcode scanner to scan a case of the beef trimming into this recipe. Now that I've scanned the barcode of the case, this is now visible to the operator on the screen. I can now put a weight on the scale, which you will notice the scale weight changing on the screen, as well as the visual gauge. Now that I have scanned my barcode and have a stable weight, I can now select Save, which will then deduct the stock from inventory and scan the items into the recipe. Depending on how the system is configured, you may not be required to weigh each case of product into the recipe. Instead, you may want to use the weight of the barcode, which can be configured to do so. This can improve the efficiency of the operator scanning items into the recipe by saving them having to weigh each case individually. You can see that the total for the beef trim is increasing on the product button, as well as the gauge is changing to reflect. You will now notice as I get closer to completing the ingredient, the gauge changes to show the tolerance that is configured for the ingredient. If I try and weigh in more than the tolerance, I'll receive an error. As an operator, I have to get the weight of the items within the configured tolerance for the product. Once it is within the tolerance, I can then select Save. Now that I have weighed in the required amount of the ingredient, I can select to complete the ingredient, which will then disable the product button and mark the ingredient as complete for this batch. I will now complete this process for the remaining ingredients. Now that I have scanned in all the ingredients into the recipe and marked them as complete, I now have the option to mark this whole batch as complete. Once I do this, the system will automatically take me to the next batch, which will also enable the products and return their values to 0. This process can then be repeated for the entire work order until all batches are complete. This was a demonstration of scanning items into a sequential blending process within the Emudex recipe module.